Hello and welcome to India Ideas, DD India's weekly show which is all about science and tech, innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm Gautam Roy. Each week we bring you news and views related to key developments in India's startup ecosystem. Today we're showcasing something where India's startups are much ahead of their corporate counterparts: gender equity. The recently released Women in India's Startup Ecosystem report, or WISER, said that women-led startups are much ahead of male-led outfits on gender equity where senior roles are concerned. Women-led startups have 2.5 times more women in senior roles compared to male-led startups. It also said that startups overall are better placed than Indian corporates on gender equity. There's even more encouraging data on funding of women-led startups, which begs the question: is India's startup ecosystem in general setting a trend which the corporates could aspire to emulate? A key determinant in this incremental transformation is also the funding of women-led startups in the proportion. So let's also see how is that measuring up in the eyes of our guests. Joining us today are Seema Chaturvedi, founding partner, AWE Funds, which invests in innovation and deep tech to promote gender equity and climate action. We also have with us founders or co-founders of two women-led startups as well that AWE Funds is backing. We've got Dr. Vaishali Kulkarni, founder and CEO, KB Call Sciences, which is producing sustainable natural colors from renewable biomass or microbes. And we also have Aparna Bhogu with us, co-founder, Monitra Health, which is a medtech startup that aims to help clinicians in early accurate diagnosis of medical conditions with simple cutting-edge innovations. First to you, Seema, what do you make of the WISER findings in the first place? Does it reflect what you've also been witnessing in the Indian startup ecosystem, particularly where the proportion of funding given to women-led startups is concerned?
Well, first of all, Gautam, thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you, Doordarshan, for highlighting and shining a spotlight on this very important and relevant topic, which is actually a nation-building area that we should all be looking at. Now, as you rightly said, there is tailwinds. We are very excited about the WISER findings, and let's just say it's been many years in the making. So it's not been, turning on a switch. We are, of course, joined by two phenomenal women founders and co-founder and leadership. But I will say, and before we start patting ourselves on the back, and which we should, but taking this as a sign of things having been sorted, the onion needs to be peeled. There are many more things that need to be understood, and what we are trying to back as our funds is highlighting the business case of investing gender smart, because in that business case is the embedded impact case, which I referenced as nation building. And it solves for definitely the biggest problems facing us, which are climate action. And while we as a fund invest in climate, health, agri, selectivity, fintech, edtech, we are noticing a significant increase in the number of women businesses, for sure, but also be mindful of the fact that there is a bit of a selection bias. And so, the numbers referenced in WISER does not make India and does not capture the full complement of women-founded startups. These are all registered startups. So I want to emphasize and applaud the government for what it's doing, but a lot more needs to be done. And we are excited to be encouraging. I think we are at this point one of the early proponents of highlighting the fact that when you back women entrepreneurs like Vaishali and Aparna, not only are the investors going to make significant returns, but the country is going to gain very, very significantly as well.
All right, sounds wonderful. Now, Dr. Kulkarni, as a startup founder, have you felt this change taking place in the recent years? That as KB Call Sciences was founded in 2018, how has your journey been so far as a woman-led startup?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Gautam, for the kind introduction first. And I agree with Seema that there has to be a lot has to be still done in this field. But yes, what I've observed is there has been a general shift in these recent years. And somehow I believe that women-led startups are now being given their recognition they deserve. And for us, the journey began in 2018. It was challenging and at the same time fascinating too. Challenging because as a woman-led startup, like challenging, it becomes when we talks about working in shifts or long distance travel. So with that respect, it was a bit challenging and fascinating. As you know, we get to learn more things, like we get to meet more brands and various investors. So it was a fascinating experience also.
All right. I'll come back to you, Seema. We seem to have lost Aparna for a bit. Why do you think India's startup ecosystem is doing better on the gender equity front than the corporate sector? Is it because it's far more nascent as compared to the big corporations which have been around for decades and therefore reflects contemporary thinking and practices better, or are other factors at play?
No, it's all of the above, Gautam. And I think, definitely it's the nascency of the startup ecosystem, which is resetting, and it's the tailwinds are in play, as I referenced earlier. Higher literacy rates among women. There are many government schemes that are actively, back in 2015, when I started this journey for promoting gender equity through promoting women entrepreneurs, let's just say we could count the number of organizations or quote unquote schemes that were in play. Now, if you turn around and see many incubators are emphasizing accelerators, and government, state and central are emphasizing the need to incorporate. So startup, because it's like leapfrogging, and that comes with any new phenomena.
where you have सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है मुझे ऑडियो नहीं आ रहा है वहां से
Yeah, keep going, Seema.
Yeah. We startup ecosystem, because of its nascency, has the advantage of leapfrogging a lot of what might be deeply embedded biases in the corporate system. Now, having said that, as Vaishali emphasized and touched upon, startup ecosystem offers some key benefits that corporates typically don't extend even today. Fundamental among which is what she touched upon, flexibility. This whole work-life balance is not as available to women in corporate settings. And there is studied drop-off in participation of women in labor force at two pivotal points in a woman's life. The first one is early on, when she's married off, and then she is, told or it's subtly implied that she is going to take time to be with family, her new family, and that becomes an important ask, which I'm seeing among the younger women declining, which is great, because then the family is appreciating that she has a broader role to play. The other pivotal time when women have stepped back from participating in corporate India is at about childbirth or taking care of aging parents. And these are two very big cliffs that I call are relevant cliffs when women participation dips, and it is reflected in the rather low labor participation rates of India for the fast-growing economy that it is. Now, startups and entrepreneurship is a very effective alternative to pursuing a fulfilling career with highly accomplished women like Dr. Kulkarni and Aparna, while giving them that ability to map their own path. And that is very, very important. There are additional factors of the fact that there are still deeply embedded biases, and we can elaborate on that, and that does in some manner still show up in the levels of funding that women businesses have attracted. But here's the proof, and I referenced this in my opening answer. Women are getting, yes, they're getting an increased pie, but the pie itself is a smaller subset of the overall macro scene. And so you're taking a bigger chunk of a smaller pie, whereas we as orphans are trying to drive gender equity at a whole different level. And we can elaborate on that later. But that is where we are seeing a lot of significant advantage, not just to investors, but also to the country. And I'll rest with this one statistic that if 20% of the unicorns are women, in an environment where women do not get anywhere close to equal funding, should we not, as investors, be saying, that is essentially an asset class? I can call it that. I guess men might not find it as easy to call it an asset class, which it is. Why are we not looking at backing a winning set of founders where they have taken a smaller amount of capital allocation and transformed it to a unicorn status? So I'll pause there, but there are interesting changes, and we are hoping that now everything we are seeing as startup as a case study is going to flow over to corporate India as well.
Okay, well, let's hope that happens soon. Now, Dr. Kulkarni, what to your mind sets apart women-led startups from the wider ecosystem? It's mostly felt that such startups would have a larger proportion of women in the workforce, but are there other differences as well? Could you unmute yourself, please? Yes, thank you.
Yes, yes, Gautam, I agree. Women-led startup has a more women workforce, but there are other differences also which I have seen. I believe that women, they are multitaskers, so like they can handle 2-3 profiles at a time. So that's also a difference I consider. And the most important thing what I feel is women tend to under-promise but over-deliver. I believe that Seema would also agree because of the super financial returns which AW is receiving. I believe that they are calculated risk takers. So they under-promise, but they do over-deliver.
That's pretty interesting.
So that's the difference.
Let's hear Seema on it as well. What do you think, Seema? Is that something that is bearing out?
Absolutely. And, without necessarily giving away the secret sauces of one manager, I will, in the interest of larger good, emphasize that there are definitely the investment alpha that we all in the fund management industry seek are totally unlocked when you have women in leadership, women in employee base, women in supply chain, women in market making. As I've said before, the fastest growing economy in the world is no longer a country, but women. Because, and I don't say this as just a rousing slogan, it is a reflection of the reality. And it is underpinned by moving decision-making, moving capital, hopefully more, that needs to happen, but moving leaders and they recognizing the diversity of thought that comes from saying, why are we not optimizing our supply chain? And in the past, it has always been because, we're not familiar with this aspect of having, say, for example, a women-focused supply chain. Well, the company is seriously paying for the fact that its supply chain is very inefficient. And we have seen this firsthand in our portfolio companies. All our warehouse investments have raised significant upfronts. And we were calculating our numbers for every dollar or every rupee that we have invested. We have catalyzed now 20 rupees of co-investors. And for every rupee that we've invested in the early days of our fund, we have seen 9 rupees of follow-on rounds happening in very quick succession. And all of these up rounds have happened at anywhere closer to 4x. So the numbers are bearing out.
Okay. Now, Seema, if you look at some other data sets as well, for example, WEF's Global Gender Gap Report ranks India at 127 on gender parity overall and at 142 on women's economic participation. Now, there's still a long way to go, clearly. What more could be done to ensure that women find their rightful place in India's entire workforce and at all levels?
Thanks for pointing that out. And that kind of alludes to the point I made at the opening comment of saying, while startup ecosystem is a great showcase of the potential of women and their transformative power in nation building and delivering returns, there is a lot more that needs to happen because startups is a smaller subset of the macroeconomic landscape in India. What we as all funds are trying to do is address the underpinnings of that macro environment. And we had the honor of meeting Prime Minister Modi and we explained this to him. So, in our reckoning, there are 5 things that should happen. And our team is very, very passionate about promoting gender equity, not just on the backs of women founders, but as I alluded, also on the backs of efficient supply chains that are embracing more women suppliers, riding on this wave of women consumers and greater decision making shifting in the hands of women. For example, areas like femtech, totally underfunded, extremely underexplored, and that speaks to our healthcare focus as well. But looking at employees, which increases efficiency, thereby bringing up the labor participation rates for India. So that's item 1 that we can absolutely do. What by supporting women founders, the other important areas that I would like to advocate for is starting from the top in 2 manners. One is greater capital allocation in the hands of women investors. And while it may seem like a plug, there is actually, much like Dr. Kulkarni and Aparna have delivered, women fund managers have outperformed even in COVID times. And this is a study by Goldman Sachs saying that women fund managers outperform. So in the power of allocation of capital resides a lot of solutions. Secondly is women on boards in corporate settings. When you see women on boards, the diversity of thought, it's simple, it's very commonsensical, but very difficult to adhere to. And while the Companies Act revision has transformed the scene of women on boards, a lot more needs to happen. The other aspects are giving women more market access, and then helping on a macro level, whether it's rural and small tier 2, tier 3 towns, helping women with financial literacy and digitization, because that is going to be a game changer in scaling up gender equity.
All right. I believe Aparna is with us now. Good to have you finally, Aparna. Yours is a deep medtech startup. Finding VC money for such startups is conventionally thought to be harder compared with other sectors, although things might be changing now. DeepTech is the talk of the town now. But did you encounter any such hurdles before you came across AWA funds in SEMA and your other backers?
Thank you so much, Gaurav. Yes, I had some technical issue. It's resolved now, so I'm very happy to be here. To answer your question, yes, it is difficult to find funding for medtech, deep tech startups because the gestation cycle that we typically have is very long. So what happens is that you will need to have an investor needs to have a lot of patience to be able to go through that R&D cycle, then prototyping cycle, and then that is when we will start seeing, going to the market and seeing the fruits of all the hard work that was done. We were very lucky because we were able to find backing from the agencies like BIRAC and US India Tech Fund, who initially backed us with their grants. And we were able to sail through from idea to the prototyping stage. Once we were ready for equity funding, we were backed up by very good angel funds as well as the VCs. And we are very lucky to find a fund like SEMA's, the AW fund, because these guys really understand the tech industry, the deep tech industry, and they have placed their money knowing that these are the things that happen in the medtech where the gestation cycles are going to be longer. But once the things are thorough, the benefits will be much higher. So thank you so much, SEMA, and thank you so much, AW funds, because your backing matters a lot to us.
Certainly, I'm sure it does. And it would matter to your patients that you're serving as well, because they would like to see that this sort of a benefit is accrued to others in need as well. Now, Dr. Kulkarni, what sort of practices, because it's all about the kind of environment that you provide, and women do need a certain kind of conducive environment. So what kind of practices have you instituted in KB Call Sciences to boost gender equity in your startup? Is there something which could even be adopted by, say, the corporates?
Nowadays, corporates, they are following certain criteria, but we at KB Calls, we believe in equal opportunity. We give preference to the skill set irrespective of the gender. The most importantly criteria or policy which we have employed is, as mentioned by Seema earlier, that we believe in flexible timing working, because when it comes to women, if we give flexible working hours to them, then it's very convenient for them to have a work-life balance. So that's the thing I believe. And apart from that, we believe in gender equal pay. There is a equal pay for both the genders, irrespective of whether the work is done by male or female, because I believe that there are various differences in the pay parity, especially in other sectors. And mostly at Chemicals, we create awareness programs for women to understand the company policies and their rights more in detail. So these are the things we consider. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Aparna, women-led startups such as yours can really put the message out on gender equity as well. You can mentor other women entrepreneurs and professionals apart from employing them. Is it something which is becoming a norm in the ecosystem rather than an exception?
Absolutely, Gaurav, because just employing them or keeping them on your payrolls is not sufficient anymore. And we are truly becoming a world where people need to stay connected, people need to form communities and start doing things together. So from the community where I am here over here, we belong to a place called Hyderabad, a place in Hyderabad called T Hub, which has given us immense fillip in terms of this one. So for example, not just supporting startups, they have also started a group for women entrepreneurs where we regularly meet and look at what other women entrepreneurs are doing, what are the things that where they are getting stuck and how we can help them out. So these kind of groups are regularly formed. We meet on a regular basis and we coach each other. In addition to that, what we do to people who are within the organization. So basically what they say is everything begins at home first. So what in our organization we do is we encourage all women employees to say that there is no ceiling above you, because most of the limitations always come from our own thinking. So we always tell them that there's no ceiling. You can achieve whatever you want. You can go ahead and perform much better than what you think you can. So don't limit yourselves. And it's the entire team, basically men and women, they are being told that there's nothing called men or there's nothing called women. It's just a job, and whoever does the job best is who deserves to get that.
Okay. All right. So that sort of a level playing field should also be there. Now let me come to you, Seema, for the final question, if this is the final one. If the time allows, we could maybe squeeze in one more. Now, do you feel the entire ecosystem, all stakeholders ranging from VCs to governments, both at the central and state levels, are also doing their own bit where gender equity among startups is concerned? Or I think you would say that there's more that's required?
I think absolutely, as somebody who's always wanting to bring in further change and hopefully positive change, a lot more needs to happen. I will commend the state governments that have actively risen to the challenge. But here is a recommendation for us as a country, for the state governments and incubators, policymakers. We are at an interesting inflection point, and I might even, without sounding too dramatic, say in the history of humankind, we are facing some deep challenges in climate change. And sadly, the burden of climate change is not gender neutral. It is established empirically that there is a high, almost as high as a 14 times burden on women. Now, I would encourage the governments to understand that this can be a pivotal time, and funds like ours, we are positioning ourselves of saying not only are we climate, and that's why not only are we gender equity focused, we are in the act of being gender equity focused and delivering on climate action. Through our investments, we are trying to allow for a just, equitable transition. And that becomes important because this can be a very pivotal reset moment where we are actually drawing upon the innovation that can come through and can reset for generations going forward. And as is famously said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And here we are as humankind facing a very terrible, but in a manner, good, terrible crisis. We should use this to leapfrog this whole resetting of gender equity and bring in, because money is flowing. And for example, by some estimations, $2.1 trillion is going to come to India in investments or homegrown or from outside. And yet, sadly, less than 8% of jobs are being offered to women. So 70 plus million jobs are going to be given, less than 8% are going to women. So let's be mindful of this proactively, and let's, between allocation of capital, which is gender equitable, climate action oriented, and between promoting women in multiple different roles, try to bring that reset button home. And one last thing I want to emphasize is climate, and Aparna is a great example of this, because what they are doing is so phenomenal in their outreach of tier 2, tier 3 towns, which is what impressed us. Climate is not just about certain renewable energy, and it's a broader subset. What Vaishali and KB Coles is doing is direct, but then the health outcomes associated with climate are equally significant. And a lot of disease states can be now increasingly, especially chronic diseases, are being increasingly linked to climate change or
yes, they call lifestyle diseases for a reason. But I'm afraid we're completely out of time. Seema, Aparna, and Dr. Kulkarni, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this issue, where it comes together beautifully if you see it that way. Just don't see funding women-led startups or even climate tech as something that will impinge on your wallets alone. It's an inconvenience, but it can be a business prospect. It can be remunerative, and it can heal the planet. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us.
And that's all we have for the moment in this edition of India Ideas. But do keep watching the show and DD India for all the latest. There's a lot of content here that is just waiting for you to set your eyes on. Thanks for watching.